All right. Hi, everybody. I'm going to give people about another 2 minutes to join, and then we'll get started. All right. So I'm going to get started. Wait one moment. All right. Well, welcome to the Tutor Talk for October. We're going to be talking about worksheet beyond worksheets, creative and engaging assignments for your adult learners. I did give this talk at our spring tutor conference. However, it was standing room only, so some people did not get a chance to attend the workshop, whether you were there or you weren't. So now we're here, and we'll be recording this as well, so that you can rewatch, and those of you who couldn't make it today can watch at any point. To get started, my name is Miranda. I'm the South Hills Program Coordinator with Literacy Pittsburgh. Um, and I am excited to share this information with you today. Uh, so I will be going over the benefits of uh, using creative assignments, uh, doing extra practice ideas, showing you what kind of assignments you can use to engage your students. And then I will turn it over to you all to see what kind of assignments you like to do with your students, and sharing any additional assignments that I might not have uh, talked about in this tutor talk. So let's talk about the benefits of creative assignments. So there's a lot of research that shows that getting students to think creatively and think outside of the box is really beneficial to learning. The research says that daily practice helps students retain learned skills, improve over time, and build confidence. So, students that practice outside of the classroom often experience improved and consistent language retention, and they also progress faster towards their goals. Uh, and repeated exposure of the spoken language, so English in this case, enables students to better comprehend a variety of speakers, because no one sounds the same. So getting them started with thinking about all different types of speakers of English and different dialects and accents is a wonderful way to help your student. By asking your student to apply concepts that they've learned in your tutoring sessions to real life scenarios, students also develop critical thinking skills that are essential to their success. And extra practice also boosts confidence in the skills that your students are trying to learn. So, how does getting creative help your students? So, imagine that I'm your tutor, and at the end of our session, I ask you to read a short article about the benefits of metal over plastic fly reels, and then answer questions from a worksheet. For those of you that are familiar with fly fishing, this might be fascinating. But for me and for most of us, uh, I'm assuming that this would not be a perfect assignment and you might find it incredibly dull. So, what if instead I asked you to think about your favorite childhood story or nursery rhyme or folk tale and translate it to English and then tell it to me at our next meeting? That is going to get you a little bit more engaged, excited. Getting creative helps students learn more about life, helps them learn more than what a textbook assumes that they need to know. I often say, you don't know what you don't know. I definitely didn't coin that, but thinking about the English in practical uses and how students are using it out in the world gives students the opportunity to recognize what they know and what they have yet to learn. And it can also help you figure out where there are gaps in their learning, because some advanced students have big gaps because they taught themselves or there's just some element that is missing from their education. So getting creative is great. Some general tips that I will um, recommend following is to utilize your students' interests. So if your student is interested in cars, maybe assigning something that has to do with watching cars and thinking about colors or specific vocabulary, or finding a magazine, a car gearhead magazine, and looking at that as a literary source. Using your students' interests as a guide for creative assignments is great because it means that the student will be engaged in what you're going to be using. Um, Another thing to do is accept failure as a learning experience. Not every creative assignment is going to be a winner, but that shouldn't discourage you from trying these new things in and out of your sessions. In particular, I was teaching an advanced conversation group, and I decided to try a new activity called Box of Lies, which you may have seen on Jimmy Fallon, where the student has a box with an item in it that they need to describe to somebody else who can't see the item. Um, the students absolutely hated it because they were at some points they were encouraged to lie, and that felt morally wrong. And some of them didn't have quite the same vocabulary, or couldn't, or just got really frustrated. So it wasn't a winner. And I know not to try that again, but it was a good learning experience for everyone in how comfortable we are with certain things and trying new things. And lastly, working within your student's schedule and lifestyle is going to be key. So if your student mentions that their family is going to a museum, you might create an assignment around that. Perhaps they pick their favorite art piece or display from their time at the museum, and then write simple sentences about it, or simple sentences to describe it. You can then pull up a photo during your class and have them be the expert or the museum guide and have them tell you about it. You can make it practical and easy to work into daily responsibilities, because that is the best way to get students to do assignments outside of class, especially if they are very busy either with work or their home life and taking care of children or other people. So now going into some of the assignments that you could consider adding to your repertoire. So the first being storytelling. A lot of communication is storytelling. So as I mentioned earlier, those folk tales or children's stories are a great place to start, even with some lower level students, having them translate a traditional story, sharing their culture, and also finding new vocabulary words and figuring out how to tell stories. As you get more advanced, you can incorporate something called the interview, where you task your student with finding somebody, maybe a friend or a family member, to interview, and then have them come back to class and tell you about this person. Maybe you can even give them specific questions to ask, so that they're communicating information and relaying information back to you, summarizing in English. And then as you get even more advanced, anecdotes become incredibly important for making friends, for business, becoming successful in business and in family life and neighbors. We've all heard really boring anecdotes, but there's also been some compelling anecdotes out there. And so practicing telling those stories, practicing pauses and speaking slowly and finding the engaging details is a great thing to practice with students so that they can continue with that English communication outside of your class. Um, Another great way to practice and to get your student thinking in more practical ways is thinking about restaurants and ordering. So everyone's gone to a restaurant. Everyone will probably go to a restaurant in the future. That seems to be a fact of life. So you can have your students bring in menus or have look up a menu online, and you can talk about them, use them as a literary source, talk about ingredients. You can have them practice ordering with you if they know that they're going to be going to a restaurant coming up and they're going to have to order, or encourage them to be the one to order, because the more they practice speaking English in those relatively high stress situations, even though ordering something from a menu doesn't seem very high stress for us, uh, the more they practice, the better they'll do, the more confident they'll feel. And you can even take this a step further and take your lesson to lunch. Meet them at a coffee shop or a restaurant. You can even do that research ahead of time with them, practice the ordering, and then have them order during lunch. It's incredibly important to practice, but you may also discover that there are some areas that you didn't know to prepare for, they didn't know to prepare for. Um, I remember a tutor telling me that she took her two students out to lunch at Aladdin's. One of them ordered a chicken salad, and she was asked, "Do you want white meat or dark meat?" Which is something that she's never been asked before. She had never thought about. And so that was something that they came across that they had to, in the moment, figure out what was meant by that and complete ordering a salad, because you don't know what you don't know. And then on the topic of food, you can encourage your students to go to the farmer's market. Farmers markets are great for conversation practice. I know the season is almost over, but it's always great to encourage them to go. Often there are specialty shops that are set up with booths that they would love to tell anyone about their product. So it's a great way to encourage your student to ask questions and talk to somebody in an environment where the person really does want to talk to them. And it's a great place to learn more about local artisans, get grocery shopping done, all at the same time. And a great thing to note is that all Pittsburgh area farmers markets accept food stamps. So if your student is on SNAP or using public benefits, they can utilize that program at the farmers market and get quality ingredients and even use their food stamps in ways they didn't know they could. And it's a great place to meet your neighbors. So you can make friends, meet dogs, start conversations in line, it's a great place to go, and encourage your students to go in a pretty low risk environment. Um, Oral reports are also a great in-person, in class and outside of class assignment. So all of our students uh, are exceptional and have something that they are an expert in. All of us are an expert in something. So you can have them prepare to tell you about something that they consider themselves an expert in, whether that be quantum mechanics or changing a diaper or bedtime routines. Um, Anything that the student considers themselves knowledgeable or an expert in, and then tell them they have 3 minutes to tell you all about the topic the next time you meet, and that you'll ask them questions about the topic. So that way they're prepared, they have some sort of, they can even have something written down, but at the same time, you're going to be asking them questions. So they may not be able to fully have everything written down and prepared. And it allows them to start thinking on their feet and answering in English, share something that they're passionate about, and uh, allows them to start thinking about oral reporting, which is very important for business and for even just making friends and sharing a skill. Something else that I love to encourage is journaling. So you could do a traditional journal where the student writes weekly or daily, maybe a few sentences about their week or something like that. It's a great way to practice writing, especially if your student struggles with spelling and grammar. It's a great way to just get the writing on the page and they can bring it in, and you could use it as a way to practice grammar and spelling and sort of do some editing, or you can just use it as a place to start conversation. But my favorite journaling is keeping a vocabulary journal. So as students attain more English, interact with more people, interact with media, there will be words that are unknown. I, as a native English speaker, interact with words that are unknown all the time. So keeping a journal of those words, and if they feel confident and have the time, the student could by themselves find the definition and write it down, bring it in, or they could just simply bring in the words that they came across, and you with them in a collaborative effort can find the definition, start using it in sentences, create flashcards or things like that. Or once you have enough vocabulary words, start writing a story, but continually incorporating that vocabulary into their lives and into their lessons. Um, and it's a practical way to incorporate things that they're coming across pretty often. There's
Mhm.
also a really tasty option, which is recipe sharing. So you can have a recipe share where each of you bring in a recipe that's important or cultural or just you enjoy making. Or you could go a step further and both you and your student make the dishes and either trade them to take home or have a meal together in the moment of your lesson and use that as a place to start talking and sharing memories associated with the recipes. You can even prepare for this beforehand by talking about elements of a recipe because there's a lot that goes into it. There's measurements, timing, ingredients, directions, ordinal numbers like first, second, third. Um, Talking about that, uh, thinking about that in terms of vocabulary, measurements being incredibly important and very different depending on where you're from, with the metric system measuring by weight instead of volume. Um, so figuring that out, being able to share those recipes, and sharing sort of a very personal part of yourself, the recipe that you enjoy making for your family, or something that's very traditional, or even just cookies. They're tasty. But it's a great way to connect with your student and do something fun. But the key is that you also have to participate. You can't just tell your students, bring in food for me. You also have to bring something. It's about that cultural sharing. My absolute favorite of all of these suggestions is the photo scavenger hunt. I think it's really unique and it's really fun, and everyone can do it because everyone now has a phone. So you give your student a list of 3 to 5 things. It can be themed around your current lesson in Standout or whatever book you're using. So clothing or food uh, or like vocabulary from the particular unit. You could give them general objects depending on their level. So at a lower level, you could do colors, or at a very high level, you could do something abstract. My go to example is the word melancholy. It's kind of hard to understand, but they then have to go take a picture of each prompt item and show you in the next class. So they have to then tell you why this photo is melancholy. Um, but it helps them describe, like, get vocabulary, start understanding in the context of the world around them. It's fun to take pictures and share later. And you can use it as a notice and wonder item during your sessions. For those of you unfamiliar, that's using a photo as the text and the source for your lesson. So with this photo here, with the pink flower, you can talk about colors and shapes. You can talk about seasons. Sometimes students will talk about a memory. What does this remind you of? Um, and some people may talk about the past, or like, I remember when I was a little girl, there was a field of flowers that looked similar to this. And gets them talking, gets them thinking, and mostly talking in English is the big goal here. Um, a great example of this exercise in action is 5 things that you ate this week. Hopefully, every student is eating at least 5 things during the week, and they may not have the English vocabulary to describe everything that they make and eat. So they might have to look it up to tell you later, but it helps them understand what they know, what they don't know. And it's a great way to use descriptors and additive detail, talk about what what's happening in the world, what's happening with them. And it's so easy to just snap a quick picture. So if they don't have a ton of time because they have multiple children, or they work a very busy job and they don't have time to do your traditional homework assignments, the assignment to take 5 pictures throughout the week is not going to be a very heavy burden. Um, Another way that you can engage your student is through TV, movies, and books, media. Um, so you could do this in the traditional sense. Most program coordinators will recommend if that your students start listening to podcasts or watching TV with English and English subtitles, which is great and should be done to expose your student to the English language. But another way that you could use media that your student might already be viewing, to your advantage, is to select a show, a movie, or a book to consume alongside your student. So you could watch 1 episode per week, both of you outside of class, or read 1 chapter, or watch the movie, or watch one part and then finish it the next time. And then, although English exposure is good and students should be encouraged to consume media in English, if it makes more sense for your intermediate student to view the item in their language, so that they understand what they're viewing. The key is to discuss together in English. So if your student speaks Portuguese and feels somewhat uncomfortable watching in English and being able to then discuss later, it might make sense for them to view the movie or the TV show in Portuguese so that they understand what they're viewing, but then you talk with them about it and discuss during your sessions in English, and that's the key. You can also, as a little exercise, have a student think of a movie and then be prepared to describe it or have them write about it before your next session. And then you have to guess what movie they're describing. So, of course, this comes with the understanding that there is commonality between the movies that you watch. But if you choose maybe a children's movie and you watch children's movies with your kids or your grandkids and they're watching the children's movie with their kids, then you can have them pick one of those and describe it to you, and you have to guess Finding Nemo or things like that. Another great opportunity in everyday life to get some English practice in is people watching. So you can have your student go sit in a public area and you can give them a specific thing to observe, like clothing or whatever theme you're working on, or just in general. It works great if your student is a parent who takes their kid to the park. It's a great thing to watch people while keeping an eye on your child at the benches if you're not fully in with them. And you can then have them report on some of the people or the things that they observed, patterns, activities, clothing, colors. So you can give them something very specific or something very broad to observe. If your students encourage your students not to take photos of random people, random strangers, because but because that's a little rude, but just sitting and observing at a mall, a coffee shop, out in a park or a playground is a great way to start thinking about like specific vocabulary words in English as you're seeing them, because the goal is to start thinking in English and using English more and more. And then podcasts, as I mentioned earlier, podcasts are wonderful in addition to TV, movies, and books. There are lots of popular podcast genres, so this is perfect for whatever your student is interested in, whether it be true crime or lifestyle, fashion. There's podcasts specifically for English language learners. There's sports podcasts and scripted dramas, science podcasts, political news, if that's what your student is interested in, and local history, local culture, all kinds of stuff happening. So some great podcasts that I typically recommend for students for news would be The Seven from the Washington Post. And this is a great podcast that covers the 7 most important and interesting stories of the day. And it's produced by the Washington Post. And it's about 7 minutes, so it's not particularly long either. There's also Today Explained, which focuses on a current news story and breaks it down for the average person. And wonderful things about podcasts is that you can slow down the rate of speech for understanding. The variety allows students to engage with their interests, and it does expose your students to multiple speakers. There's different formats of podcasts, and some of them have multiple speakers or guests, which will allow students to hear all kinds of different dialects. And then many podcasts also have transcripts. So the student could read along uh, as they are listening, or you can, if you decide to incorporate this into class, you could have them listen to the podcast and then use the actual transcript during the class to confirm understanding. If your student likes storytelling, there's the moth, which is just stories about people, human interest. There's lots of different possibilities, including local uh, podcasts like the one from Rick Seaback, who's a Pittsburgh local celebrity, and he talks about Pittsburgh type things. Um, Another great resource in terms of podcast is StoryCorps, which is just human interest stories. It's a project that collected many stories, recorded people telling their stories, and they're relatively short too. So, like the longest one on in this picture is a 15-minute story about a family business. But it's people from all across the United States, all different topics. There's podcasts, there's stories, there's animation, and so it's great to explore inside and outside of class. But you'll find something that everybody finds interesting at some point, like between all of the different stories and the archives. There's something for everyone. And then you can use music, incorporate it into your sessions, out of your sessions, um, having students listen to music as a way to expose them to English, but also using lyrics as a literary source is a great way to make connections with your students. Um, it's very beneficial, especially if there's a generational age gap, because it can be used to make a connection with your student. Students respond and engage when their instructor acknowledges and incorporates their background knowledge and interest into lessons. This has shown particularly uh, good results within the adult education and prison system. So for adult educators teaching classes in jails and prisons, uh, they like for GED, having students use songs that they are listening to as literary sources for figurative language and vocabulary and storytelling is incredibly helpful and has been successful in creating connections and allowing students to feel more comfortable in classes. So, bringing this back to Literacy Pittsburgh tutoring, it does help students connect with tutors, connect with the person they're working with. It again acknowledges their background and interests. It helps them start to develop more modern vernacular, which is not something that you're going to find as much in a traditional textbook. Uh, it also engages the student because it's sharing something very personal of theirs, and you can even do the same. So bring in lyrics from your favorite song and share that as a way to make a connection. And it's always an approachable way to introduce figurative language. The metaphors and imagery and alliteration, which can be a struggle to grasp as a concept, but with song lyrics, you can start to kind of decode that. So that's everything I have. I am happy to take any questions, or if anybody would like to share based upon any of these questions about the homework assignments you're already giving, any activities that you tend to assign that were not included in here. It's not an exhaustive list. It's mostly what I tend to recommend. And if you've tried anything new, how have your students responded?
Miranda,
Yes.
I just want to thank you for this topic. It's very timely for me. I have been trying to use these type of techniques recently. For those of you that don't know me, I do have only one student, which makes it very nice because I can, uh, direct things to her interests. And I started out using some TED Talks,
Mhm.
some short TED Talks as source material because they typically have, subtitles in English and in many languages in a lot of cases. And that makes it very handy for the person who needs to use words. Now, I found I stopped kind of using TED Talks because some of them were not appropriate. Some of them were maybe too deep. Um, uh, the student that I have, though, is interested in uh, extending her education. She doesn't have any college level education, but she's interested in possibly uh, enrolling in a college here. And so I've tried to challenge her with the type of vocabulary that she might be exposed to in college courses, especially freshman type, entry level courses. And one thing that you didn't mention but has helped is Chat GPT.
Okay.
Okay, so I tried to see what my student is interested in, and I know she's interested in history. And so I've used Chat GPT to generate um, some essays, maybe 300 or 500 word essays on a topic. Um, and ChatGPT writes beautiful essays and very good English. The grammar is perfect. The vocabulary is very good, and a lot of times you can specify how deeply you want them to go, what type of language, whether it's more accessible for, early learners or more scholarly, right? So that's been really helpful. I mean, she's a Chinese student, so I've used essays on Chinese history, and then I said, okay, well, do one on Pittsburgh or Pennsylvania history. And so she generated one on Pittsburgh history, and we used that.
Hmm.
But I know that she's also very interested in music, so we started using music. And I wanted to find some appropriate kind of music, and so since I'm so old, I hearken back to some of the singer-songwriters of the 70s, like Joni Mitchell
Oh,
and
great.
and James Taylor. And somebody like Joni Mitchell's very poetic, and her language is generally very good, especially in her earlier songs. Simple and nice lyrics. And then I had her, she mentioned a Chinese artist that she liked, James J. Chow. And so I
Mhm.
invited her to do a Jay Chow song, and we discussed the lyrics on that, and we've used that. So she's really taken to this style of learning, like you're describing here today, and she's complimented me for being, for tailoring it to her and being aware of her interests and her needs. So I've been real pleased with how that's gone. I was very pleased to see you, the subject of this tutor talk today. So thanks a lot,
Wonderful.
Miranda.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think that just shows that students do appreciate that kind of tailoring to their interests, and it
Mhm.
really does engage the student. And I think the that sharing of the music is incredibly important, and you learned something as well about Chinese music, and the I'm a little wary about AI. I'm not saying it's bad, but sometimes uh, it it's worth having a discussion with your student about the use of AI and encouraging them not to use it as a replacement for their own voice. We recently have had a couple students that create all of their emails and write all of their emails using Chat GPT, which
Hmm.
can be a struggle for us as coordinators and educators to know what help the student needs, what level they're at, because as you said, the English is perfect. And so that does not help them. It doesn't help us understand what they need, how we can help. But AI can be helpful. Chat GPT can be helpful for that kind of thing of like generating essays
Yes.
and the simple essays and things like that. But yeah, it's a big slippery slope that a lot of people are discussing, and there's much larger conversations happening out in the world about when using AI is good and when is not. I think that's a perfect use of it.
Okay.
But just also encouraging your students, this is kind of an aside, but encouraging your students not to use it as a replacement for their own voice is very
Yeah.
important.
Yes. But another thing, though, is right now, the availability of translation programs
Mhm.
is so prevalent, and
Yes.
I would rather her not use that very much. I would rather her
Yeah.
translate things herself rather than just fall back and do a translation.
Yeah. That's the exact same concept of we'd much rather students struggle. I know struggling is uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but we'd much rather students learn and attain these skills than take those shortcuts um, to appear uh, like they have mastered the English language,
Yeah.
which I can say most of us have not as native speakers. But
And I'll
yeah.
just say one more thing and then I'll get off. Um, when she did the Chinese song, the translation she pulled up was an English translation that was built so that the lyrics fit in with the meter of the song, so you could sing along the melody of the song with the English lyrics, not necessarily uh, true to the actual native language that the song was written in. So me not understanding Chinese, I'm not sure how close the the lyrics that
Yeah.
she got the translation of. I'm not sure how close that was to the actual lyrics that the author that the songwriter wrote. So I suspect that it's not very close, but
Right.
I'm gonna be mindful of that the next time I do something like that. So
And that's an exercise that you can do with your student of, asking them, well, how close is this translation?
yeah, I thought of
And
that.
them thinking about it and understanding that sometimes translation does not quite fit. Most of the time, translation does not fit one for one.
Right, because there was a video with it, and the video didn't seem to match the English lyrics that she provided. So anyway,
Yeah. Does anyone else have any assignments that they might like to try or that you've been using with your students?
Carol Logan here. My students and I don't meet in person, we Zoom. But there are several ideas I picked up today that I will definitely be using. And one in particular will be the photo scavenger hunt. I love that idea. Something we had done that you had mentioned one other time, and you mentioned it today too, was the notice and wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all of these discussions that my students have together brings them together as a group, because a lot of my students are kind of lonely, and when they have a chance to see how they have things in common in that, it's been wonderful. So I really appreciate this. Thank you, Miranda.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I did see in one of your tutor reports one time that you were doing a notice and wonder lesson, and that made me very excited.
And I do it. I don't always write that in, but I'll make sure I do in the future. But yeah, so thank you very much.
Of course.
And I just want to say, I have really learned so much tonight. The only thing that I would add, we read a couple of jokes every week at the end of the class. I bought Laughter is the Best Medicine on Kindle, and I print out some jokes, and then I have mostly a married couple. And so one of them will read one character's lines and one will read the other back and forth. And then sometimes the jokes aren't really that funny, but they pick up on things and they ask me questions about why is that funny or what does that mean? So then we get into discussions like that. But also they have to use some expression in their voice and timing, to land the punchline and things like that. So it's a lot of fun. So that's one thing I do. And then I fill in the time at the very end of class with their vocabulary words. We play hangman or sometimes we play Scrabble Slam. That's a quick little card game out of Scrabble. Those are the only things I would add, but I got a whole list of great ideas I'm going to follow up on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that sounds like a great time to incorporate those jokes. And a lot of the time, their jokes are like a play on word or play on words or something like that. But you have to know the words to know everything. So that's a great way to practice that. And as you mentioned, the timing of the joke sometimes is the key.
One other thing I've done with my students, I've sent them all bags of M&Ms.
Mhm.
And when we're meeting, they have to reach into their bag of M&Ms one at a time. And if they pull out a red one, they have to tell us about a father or a mother. If they pull out a different color, so they kind of get a chuckle out of. Well, I get a chuckle out of the candy, but
Yeah.
but it's been a good conversation starter too.
Yeah, that's really creative. I love that.
I have a question. You
Yes.
mentioned notice and wonder. Could you elaborate? What is this? I'm not familiar.
Yes. So it is a uh, tool to use during a lesson where you take a photo. So let me go back to, okay. So we can use this photo as an example, where you use a photo as a conversation starter, but also as your main source for the lesson. So you could um, take it in many different directions. So with this photo, you could talk about color. So yellow, white. You could talk about skin tone. You could talk about emotion. So what emotion do you see in this photo? Um, you could talk about uh, a time when you were very excited, and and your student could take it in a bunch of different directions, but using the photo as the source to start the conversation and guide discussion is the notice and wonder. So what do you notice and what do you wonder?
So, okay, if I understand correct, notice is just describing exactly what you see, and wonder is, okay, now what do you think is beyond?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
gotcha. Thank
And
you.
there is, I know that Anita and Lisa have done a tutor talk on this particular strategy. I believe it's called A Picture's a Thousand Words or something like that. I will find it and I will send it to you, Dana.
Thank you. Thank you.
But it is somewhere in our YouTube archives. All right.
Cool.
Anybody else have any observations or questions or anything that they're planning on trying?
Sharon Johnston here.
Mhm.
I work with one student, a Korean woman. She has been very interested in, well, doing one of the things you described, relating language to real life. So what we have done so far, and I will interject that I love the ideas from tonight. I as well. I've gotten more ideas of things to try, but so far we've tried a couple of, you might call them stories or scenarios that she suggested. She has two young daughters. She was saying, how do I approach a clerk at Target to ask about the availability of clothes for my daughter? So I created a template to follow to construct a potential conversation with the clerk. She worked through that template. I played the clerk, and we role played the conversation. And I thought it went very well. She was happy with it. I was happy with it. She got a good sense of, well, what do I do? How do I approach that clerk in Target? Second example, which you actually brought up, was ordering from a restaurant. She mentioned, she said, I like going to a restaurant, but I am insecure about calling on the phone. If I'm going to order takeout from a restaurant, I'll go there in person. So I said, let's work on that.
Yeah.
How would you go through the process of ordering on the phone? So similar to my first example, we followed the template. She created a potential or theoretical scenario for making that call. We work on Zoom, so I shared a menu from a prospective restaurant. She chose items from the menu. We role played the call. I was now the person at the restaurant at the other end, and she rolled with it, initiating the call and requesting the order. And again, we talked about how overall that could work, how you call, what you say, what happens if there's more that needs to be said that wasn't said initially.
Right.
And it went very well. And I think we'll be doing activities like this in the future. And again, I want to emphasize, I love getting some more ideas about what to do. Thank you.
Yeah, role play is a great thing, and I realize now that I did not actually put role play as an idea in here, but it is a great way to get your student more comfortable with the situations that that may be part of their goals for learning English. The most common being ordering from a restaurant or parent-teacher conferences. Those are a big one. Just practicing, asking questions, listening, and then taking out certain details. And as you mentioned, sometimes you don't quite plan out everything that ends up happening. So as I mentioned in my example earlier with the white or dark meat, that was something that was not thought about until it actually happened. And in the moment, they had to talk about it and find a way forward. So role play is a great way to get a student more comfortable. And if you are meeting with your student in person, you can always step out of the room to make the phone call and actually do the phone call. Zoom is also great if you're already doing it that way. But if you're maybe in the Galleria or the library, you can just step out, make the call, and then still role play that.
I found that role playing for when the moms take their children to the doctor's office is also important.
Yeah, that's a great observation. Any other observations or questions? We're closing in on the end of the hour, but I'm happy to take another question or so. All right. Well, I'm going to here. My contact information is here. And you can definitely find me on the Literacy Pittsburgh website. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to just contact me. I'm happy to chat about different ways to get your student engaged and think a little bit outside of the box. But I'm also, if you do something and it works really well or it doesn't, I'd love to hear about it. So just let me know. Just tell me how it goes because I'd love to hear it. All right. Well, with that, I am going to say thank you so much for coming.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Miranda.
And stay healthy, everyone.
Thank
Yes,
you.
please do. And have a wonderful night and contact me if you have any questions or concerns or want to tell me about what you do. All right.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you. Good night.